Admiral, the collaboration with IMERC, how do you see it benefiting both the work that Defence Forces does itself, but also how it could transcend or could translate into helping the Irish economy, particularly the marine economy?
Yeah, well, I suppose if we just step back for a moment and we look at the major vectors that are there in terms of positive vectors like technology development, the whole area of automation and robotics, and this explosion in data, which is extraordinary. I think, few people appreciate the amount of data that exists in the world today, which is in excess of 4 zettabytes of data, expanding every 2 years in accordance with Moore's law. And if you look to the future, in my own estimate, by 2020 we could have 10 times more data. That's 40 zettabytes of data. If we don't prepare for this, we're going to be blind. It's like walking into a blizzard. And, data obviously underpins information, which ultimately underpins intelligence, knowledge, and which adds to understanding and wisdom. So one of the points I've been making is that in order to gain power, you need to cede power. And what I mean by that is, we need to start accepting that in organisations we won't have all the answers to the wicked problems we face. So the hedge to that is actually to start looking at innovation. And by innovation I don't mean just creativity, I mean a discipline that needs to be managed. I mean actually working in collaboration with other like-minded organisations, using principles such as collaboration, reciprocity, communications, and trustworthiness. And I use the word trustworthiness because you have to be worthy of the trust of the other partner. We often use trust like confetti at a wedding, whereas in fact trustworthiness is really something that's built up together. So my point is, innovation networks, bringing together disparate organisations to work in a network, in the context of reciprocity and collaboration, can give you significant opportunities. So for us in the Defence Forces, we're dealing with complex problems every day. We're dealing with wicked problems every day. And for us to feel that we'll have the answer within the boundaries of our own organisation, in reality is less likely. But the answer may well be in our network. And that's why I found that in terms of us collaborating through what I call the three-legged stool, the end-user Defence Force personnel, working with the research community in terms of the higher education institutes, and then perhaps with an enterprise, either an SME or a foreign direct investment company, as the third leg of the stool, you manage to get this end-user driven solution to this end-user identified problem. The research community get this wicked problem to deal with. You get the benefit of the Defence Forces that are leading the actual solution to that problem. And then the enterprise side, if they're really smart, will leverage off that and maybe have a capability they can market, or a new solution or a new technology piece that they can sell. And that leads to job creation, which comes to the point you were talking about, the economy. State security is inextricably linked to economic security. So if you can have the end user in terms of the Defence Forces shifting its position from the traditional setting of the military being seen as a cost centre, you can start moving into what we call an investment centre, and ultimately with the capacity to stimulate profit centres. And that's the vision we have in the Defence Forces. We have the Defence Enterprise Committee, which is chaired by one of our assistant secretaries in the department, and that pulls this together. It looks at the opportunities that are there, and there are many programmes going on within the Defence Forces across the three services, the Army, the Air Corps and Naval Service, looking at these wicked problems we deal with, coming up with cunning solutions to them, and I think adding value to the Irish state overall.
In terms of the world we're in at the moment, the tensions we all face, I know the Irish Navy played a very prominent role, for example, in the Mediterranean in life-saving missions. How should a country's military be agile in terms of taking on technology learnings, but also being responsive to the world we're currently in with all the tensions around at the moment?
Yeah, well, I suppose if you look at it in the context of the vectors we see, some of them are quite challenging in terms of climate change, population increase, resource constraints. You take the Nile Delta as a whole, 12 countries along an area there with a population of in the region of 265 million. Estimates suggest that population will grow to nearly 700 million by 2050. So the issue with regards to migration, I think, is here to stay. And the reality, what we see in the Defence Forces, is that increasingly we have to contribute to enhancing stability at source. And that's why we have at the moment over almost 500 personnel, men and women, in 16 missions in 15 countries, endeavouring to facilitate a safe and secure environment, which is a key enabler for civil society. Civil society is a human right of every man, woman and child. It's an institution where people are free, where the institutions of state function, and where the vulnerable are protected. You know, if you take in the context of South Lebanon at the moment, we have nearly 180 troops, at present growing to about 330 this time next year. They're contributing with the other partners in the United Nations Interim Force in Lebanon to adding security with the Lebanese armed forces, not only to provide security and stability for Lebanon, but also for the million plus Syrian refugees that have come across. Similarly, along the Golan Heights in between Syria and Israel, we're contributing to stability in that area of separation. And if you come back then to the other major mission, which is the Eli Samuel Beckett, which followed on from Eli Neve and Eli Etna, we are dealing with the symptom of the problem. And so far, the Defence Forces and the 3 ships in particular have rescued almost 8,500 people. And you know, we don't know how many would have died, but certainly a percentage of that 8,500 would not be alive today were it not for the intervention of the Defence Forces. And these 3 missions actually define us in Ireland as a civilised society, that we're able to actually make decisions and to actually contribute to peace and security in areas that are often not on our doorstep but further away.
In terms of the Defence Forces itself, I mean, you guys have, I mean, an army or a defence force is it's about managing people, it's about skills, it's innovation and evolution all the time. How do you guys ensure that your people and your processes are constantly kept up to speed?
Yeah, well, I suppose we've been developing this concept around the postmodern soldier. And what I mean by the postmodern soldier, he is a soldier that has to be prepared for this really complex environment in which we operate. So first of all, he has to have his core competence in terms of his professional skills as a warrior. That's a given. That's our business. But in the context of the complexity, if you take, for instance, the innovation networks I've been talking about, and it may be an innovation network here, it could be part of the comprehensive approach abroad, whereby you're looking at that continuum from the kinetic action of the warrior right down across to the stability and institution building in terms of nation building to the end state, which is nirvana, which is civil society. You have to have the ability to work with others. So you're seeing then a requirement not only to be a warrior, but be a diplomat. And that's the requirement to actually pull together disparate groupings, whether it be IGOs or NGOs, whether it be other actors in terms of interim arrangements in government, or whether it be other forces that are working with you, with the end state of trying to come to a point of a safe and secure environment. So that's the warrior who now has to be a diplomat. But the third piece of the jigsaw is the intellectual capacity of our soldiers. So I see our brains as force multipliers. And if we can develop our soldiers, sailors and aircrew to use their intellectual capacity in a force multiplying manner, I think we can be a lot more effective. So, and that's what we're doing, by the way, in terms of all our junior NCOs are developed to level 6, our senior NCOs are developed to degree level, our junior officers to degree level. We have master programs, and we also are looking at institutionalising work-based professional PhD programs within our organisation, all with the aim of codifying knowledge in the workplace. So individuals become extremely competent in their area, and the corpus of knowledge they develop not only gives them an accredited award, but it actually is in the organisation, which gives, I suppose, robustness and resilience to the organisation. So even if they don't stay with the organisation, and I want as many of our talented people to stay in the organisation, but we have to expect that people will move on. And we have a duty to invest them back into society at a higher level than they came in. So I suppose to wrap it up is we're not just dealing with warriors, we're dealing with diplomats and we're dealing with scholars. And that's the kind of vision we're developing within Óglaigh na hÉireann, within the Irish Defence Forces, to try and develop our resource along those kind of 3 legs.